Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into a topic that might just make you spit out your beverage countries that are basically persona non grata for a whopping 43 nations. You know, those places that make governments around the world collectively clutch their pearls and issue strongly worded travel advisories. We're talking about the kind of places where your travel insurance policy goes to die. You might think you know what we're talking about, but trust me, some of the names on this list are going to surprise you. So buckle up, grab your emergency satellite phone and maybe a hazmat suit, because we're about to embark on a wild ride through the world's most surprising travel ban zones. First up, we have a country that probably won't come as a shock to anyone. North Korea. This is the nation that's basically the international community's equivalent of that weird uncle you try to avoid at family gatherings. You know, the one who wears a military uniform everywhere and insists on showing you his collection of commemorative spoons? Yeah, that's North Korea. They've got more travel restrictions than a Kardashian has Instagram followers, and for good reason. They're notoriously secretive, with a human rights record that would make even the most hardened dictator blush. Think public executions, labor camps, and a level of government surveillance that would make Orwell spin in his grave. So, yeah, North Korea, not exactly the ideal vacation spot unless you're really into propaganda posters, forced labor, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Next up, we have Syria, a country that's been embroiled in a brutal civil war for over a decade. Imagine if your family Thanksgiving dinner turned into a full-blown brawl, except instead of mashed potatoes and gravy flying through the air, it's bullets and bombs. That's essentially what's been happening in Syria, and it's about as messy as it sounds. The country has been ravaged by violence, with countless innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. We're talking about a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, with millions displaced from their homes and struggling to survive. And if the constant threat of getting caught in a firefight wasn't enough to deter you, there's also the small matter of chemical weapons being used. So, yeah, Syria is definitely not the place to be right now, unless you're a warlord with a penchant for destruction, or a journalist with a death wish, and even then, I'd probably recommend against it. Now let's talk about Iran, a country that's been in the West's bad books for, well, let's just say a while. It's like that one friend you have who's always getting into arguments with the neighbors. You know, the one who blasts death metal at 3 a.m. and parks their car across your driveway? Yeah, that's Iran. They've got a bit of a reputation for being, shall we say, a tad antagonistic towards the West, particularly the United States. It's a complicated relationship, fraught with mistrust, sanctions, and the occasional veiled threat. And while Iran's a country with a rich history and culture, it's also a place where you need to be careful about what you say and do. Don't even think about cracking a joke about the supreme leader unless you're fluent in Farsi and have a good lawyer on speed dial. So, while Iran might not be as overtly dangerous as, say, Syria, it's still a country where you need to be on your toes. Next on our world tour of places you probably shouldn't pack your suitcase for is Yemen, a country that's currently experiencing a humanitarian crisis of truly staggering proportions. Imagine a country where the tap water is basically cholera juice. The only food available is humanitarian aid, and the soundtrack to your life is the constant drone of warplanes overhead. Yeah, that's Yemen. They've been locked in a brutal civil war for years, fueled by regional powers and plagued by a level of human suffering that's difficult to comprehend. We're talking about millions on the brink of famine, a healthcare system that's basically on life support, and more displaced people than you can shake a stick at. And if the prospect of starving to death while dodging bombs doesn't sound particularly appealing, there's also the small matter of Al-Qaeda and ISIS setting up shop in the country. So yeah, Yemen is about as far from a relaxing vacation destination as you can get. It's more like a real-life version of Mad Max, but with less leather and more cholera. Ah, Libya. The land of ancient ruins, stunning deserts, and, oh yeah, complete and utter chaos. Imagine a country where the government is more of a suggestion than an actual governing body, where militias roam free, and where kidnapping is considered a legitimate career path. That's Libya in a nutshell. Ever since the fall of Gaddafi, the country has been locked in a perpetual state of instability. It's like a game of musical chairs where the music never stops, and everyone's fighting for a seat at the table, even though the table's on fire and the chairs are covered in rusty nails. And if the constant threat of being kidnapped or caught in the crossfire isn't enough to deter you, there's also the small matter of ISIS having a presence in the country. So, yeah, Libya is definitely not the place to be right now unless you're a war junkie, a hostage negotiator, or someone who really enjoys living on the edge. And even then, you might want to reconsider. Next up on our whirlwind tour of global hotspots is Somalia, a country that's practically synonymous with piracy, famine, and general mayhem. Imagine a place where the only law is the law of the jungle, where pirates roam the high seas, and where the government has about as much control as a substitute teacher in a classroom full of sugar-crazed kindergartners. That's Somalia, folks. They've been battling the terrorist group Al-Shabaab for years, and let's just say it's not exactly going well. Imagine trying to fight a hydra, but every time you cut off one head, two more grow back. That's essentially what the Somali government is dealing with, and it's about as fun as it sounds. And if the threat of terrorism and a collapsing state weren't enough to deter you, there's also the small matter of piracy. So, unless you're a seasoned negotiator with a penchant for danger or a pirate enthusiast who's always dreamed of walking the plank, I'd recommend steering clear of Somalia. Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires. It's a country with a rich history, stunning landscapes, and a knack for sending superpowers packing with their tails between their legs. It's like that friend who's really good at board games, but you suspect they might be cheating just a little bit. After decades of conflict, the Taliban is back in control, and the future is about as clear as a crystal ball filled with mud. It's a volatile situation, with the potential to unravel faster than a cheap sweater in a windstorm. And if the threat of getting caught in the crossfire isn't enough to deter you, there's also the small matter of human rights. So, unless you're a war correspondent with a death wish, a diplomat with a talent for negotiation, or a time traveler hoping to witness history, I'd recommend giving Afghanistan a wide berth. Next up, we have Iraq, a country that's been through the ringer more times than a pair of socks in a college dorm. Imagine a place where ancient history collides with modern warfare, where oil wealth fuels corruption, and where sectarian violence simmers beneath the surface like a pot of water on the verge of boiling over. That's Iraq, folks. After decades of dictatorship, invasion, and insurgency, Iraq is still struggling to find its footing. It's like a teenager going through a particularly messy puberty, except instead of acne and mood swings, it's car bombs and political assassinations. And if the constant threat of violence isn't enough to deter you, there's also the small matter of corruption. It's so pervasive, it's practically a national pastime. So, unless you're a masochist with a love of danger, a journalist with a nose for a story, or a politician with a penchant for getting involved in other people's problems, I'd recommend giving Iraq a wide berth. Welcome to South Sudan, the world's youngest nation and sadly a textbook example of how not to build a country. Imagine a place where the ink on the Independence Declaration is barely dry before the country plunges headfirst into a brutal civil war. Yeah, that's South Sudan. It's a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions, with millions displaced, widespread famine, and more human rights abuses than you can shake a stick at. And if the prospect of getting caught in a crossfire while simultaneously contracting cholera and malaria doesn't sound like your idea of a good time, there's also the small matter of the government. So, unless you're a humanitarian aid worker with a savior complex, a war correspondent with a death wish, or a mosquito with a taste for human suffering, I'd recommend steering clear of South Sudan. Last but not least, we have Venezuela, a country that's gone from being one of the wealthiest in South America to a cautionary tale about the dangers of political mismanagement and economic collapse. Imagine a place where hyperinflation is so bad that you need a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread, where basic necessities are scarce, and where the government is more interested in consolidating power than governing. That's Venezuela in a nutshell. They've been in a political and economic tailspin for years, with no end in sight. And if the prospect of experiencing hyperinflation firsthand doesn't sound appealing, there's also the small matter of crime. It's rampant, violent, and often goes unpunished. So, unless you're an economist with a morbid curiosity about hyperinflation, a journalist with a knack for finding trouble, or a fan of dystopian novels come to life, I'd recommend giving Venezuela a miss. So, there you have it. A whirlwind tour of some of the world's most surprising travel ban zones. We've explored war-torn countries, unstable regimes, and places where even the most intrepid traveler might think twice before venturing. But remember, While this list might seem daunting, it's important to remember that the world is a vast and diverse place, and these countries represent just a tiny fraction of what's out there. So, go forth, explore, and experience all that our planet has to offer. Just maybe pack some extra hand sanitizer and a bulletproof vest, just in case. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more surprising content. See you next time.